This is Surfing Through Cinema. I'm your host, Hawaii Harry. Today I will be discussing the next film for Star Wars Week. In this case, it's the TV show Star Wars The Clone Wars, which came out in 2008. Okay, so the way I broke this out, I decided to review each season and the first and last episode of each season, because it'll be kind of hard to watch every single episode of it. There's a lot of them now. And so, in the first episode ever, Yoda, he leads a small band of clones against a droid army. And I remember watching this series premiere when I was, I want to say, 10 years old. And I remember it being really, really cool. And there's like a really cool battle going on. There's like this Geonosian, I think is what he is, or whatever species Watto is in the prequels. He's this king. He's trying to decide if he wants to join either the Republic or the Separatists, and it was really cool because I really liked the style of it. The action of it was cool. The droids were funny. I really liked it. So I think it started off with a really good episode. And then the last episode for that season, a bounty hunter named Cad Bane, he is he's taking senators hostage within the Senate building in exchange for Zero the Hutt being released from jail. And for those of you who listened to the last Star Wars episode for Surfing Through Cinema, we talked about Zero the Hutt and how he was kind of a very flamboyant, very strange Hutt, and how he spoke English. It was really strange, had a southern accent. So Cad Bane is trying to release him from jail in exchange for after he captured these senators. I personally didn't like this episode as much as I liked the first one. I felt it was kind of slow and dragged on, and it's interesting seeing Anakin and Padme kind of, you know, kissing each other and stuff. It was really weird. I know they're husband and wife, but I didn't like it as much. But it was kind of funny how Padme ended up having Anakin's lightsaber, so he had to sneak around and beat up some guys without a lightsaber. So that was kind of cool, seeing a Jedi fight without that. So yeah, so that's the first season. And then season 2, first episode. So Cad Bane, he breaks into a Jedi temple and he steals a holocron, which has information about secret Jedi traditions and whatnot. And that was kind of cool. It was interesting to see, Cad Bane again. He's a cool character. I think he was the best bounty hunter for the Clone Wars for this show. Sorry to the Boba Fett fans out there, but I thought he was the best. And then the second, or I guess the last episode, speaking of Boba Fett, he's seeking revenge against Mace Windu, and he's doing so by kidnapping Republic leaders. And, this series is taking place, I think, a year or maybe 2 years after episode 2, so it was fairly recent that Boba Fett's dad was killed, and he's still, really angry and wanted revenge for that. So that was an interesting thing. Rather than Mace Windu going after him, though, Ahsoka and Master Plo Koon went after him and kind of fought him a little bit. So that was interesting. So let's get to season 3. The beginning, or I guess the first episode for this season, a group of troopers called the Domino Squad, they're being trained in the cloning facilities on Kamino, and they're struggling to get along. They're always bickering and fighting, not following orders. Some of them surrendering to the droids that they're using for practice. So there's kind of no hope for them. And then finally they get along and they graduate and become some of the more popular characters within the series. You got Heavy and Fives amongst them. And they play some pretty key roles within the rest of the series. So that was really cool seeing them from struggling and being, kind of antagonistic towards each other and then growing towards becoming teammates. So that was cool. Then the last episode of the season, Ahsoka is escaping captivity on this planet with the help of some younglings and from Chewbacca. They found him because they were shooting down this ship because they were trying to use it as a way of escaping the planet, and in it they found the one prisoner on it, and it was Chewbacca, which I thought was awesome. I always liked Chewbacca. But it was interesting when I watched it, and my wife pointed out that, hey, didn't this happen in Solo? So it made me realize, wait a minute, did Chewbacca get captured like 3 times? He's not very good if he always gets captured. So that kind of made me feel bad, but also reminded me why I don't like Solo. I still think it was cool. I really like Chewbacca. Alright, so that's season 3. Now season 4, the planet Mon Calamari, a young prince who's now trying to become the king because his dad was murdered, who was the king. He's struggling to become a leader for his people, as well as the other race of species on that planet. And, they don't agree with him. They think he's really young. And he seeks the help of the Jedi, in a way, to kind of help, break ties and prevent a civil war. So Anakin and Padme are there, trying to be diplomats. And it turns out Count Dooku is actually behind it. He's got this shark guy in there who's trying to take over, who's trying to make the other race become in charge of the planet. And it ends kind of at a stalemate. Nobody really wins in that episode, Separatist or Republic. But the planet starts to agree that the kid is ready to be a king. So that was kind of cool, seeing a different storyline like that. And it was all underwater, I might add, so that was really cool. I never thought it'd be interesting to hear what a lightsaber sounds like underwater, but it's really cool. In the last episode, Obi-Wan fights his old arch nemesis Darth Maul, who turns out to still be alive. He's just now a little crazy. And his younger brother, Savage Opress, finds him, and they're able to take him to the Night Sisters, and he becomes, kind of normal, if you could call a Sith Lord normal, to where he's not like some psychopath, but now he's pretty rigid, straightforward Sith Lord. And that was really cool. And he gets new legs. Obi-Wan is going after him to kind of stop Darth Maul from killing more innocent people. And then they capture him, and while he's doing so, one of Obi-Wan's old nemesis, Asajj Ventress, breaks into the ship, and they kind of have to work together to break out of the situation they're in. And that was an interesting thing, seeing how old enemies can kind of become frenemies and help each other escape their situation. So I like that. Then the first episode of season 5, Darth Maul is trying to recruit some pirates to work with him so he could start his own crime syndicate in the galaxy. And the original leader of the pirates, he's losing all of his main, leaders and followers, so he asks the help of Obi-Wan to come and stop Maul from doing that. And Obi-Wan does eventually do so, and then Darth Maul escapes. And we don't see him again for a while. And then the last episode of the season, Ahsoka is put on trial for potentially causing a terrorist attack at the Jedi Temple. She's put on trial. She's excommunicated from the Jedi Order. She's put on trial before the Senate. So it's a really big deal. And in the background, Anakin is trying to find out what the truth is. And he finds out it's a different Jedi within the temple who actually was the person who plotted the attacks. And at the end of the episode, the Jedi trying to bring, apologize to Ahsoka, try to bring her back. But eventually she just says, no, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be a part of this. And so this originally was the series finale, and the last shot of it is a big widescape image on Coruscant of Ahsoka walking down the steps, kind of symbolizing the end of the series and kind of foreshadowing what the Jedi Order would eventually lead to. And I really liked it. In my opinion, I think it was the perfect series finale, but I do welcome these new seasons. So speaking of that, a few years later, Netflix picked up Star Wars, the Clone Wars, and released a whole new season with 13 episodes. And so, in this first episode, a rogue clone kind of kills a Jedi during this battle they are having. And some people suspect foul play, other people suspect maybe he's just suffering from PTSD. But as it turns out, it's because each clone has a chip in them that once the Emperor calls out Order 66, it switches on and they go out and kill Jedi. So his was just faulty and happened prematurely. And so Count Dooku finds out about this and he tries to kidnap and take this clone and bring it to the Emperor so they can figure out what's going on, because that would foil the Emperor's plan of eventually overthrowing the Jedi. So this big battle goes on, they kidnap the clone, then Anakin, he and some other clones, they chase him, the ship that has the clone on it, the rogue clone, and they take him back, and then the episode ends, and kind of gives us foreshadowing of what's going to happen within that season. And then the last episode of this season, Yoda, he's going on a personal quest to figure out how Jedis can live forever, so learn about immortality. And he ends up facing off the ghost of Darth Bane. He was the first Sith Lord to create the rule that there's always two Sith Lords, a master and an apprentice. It was a very interesting episode to see Yoda, again, fighting against some huge and crazy force. And he ends up learning how to do it, or I guess how to work out immortality. So I thought that was really cool. I really liked that one. And then for about 6 years, that was it. That was the series finale for a long, long time. You know, there were rumors that Netflix might do one more season, but nobody really knew what was going to happen after that. And it wasn't until last year that Disney announced they were going to do one more season of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. I'm going to talk about them in a separate episode further down the road where I review each episode within the season. So that's kind of what I wanted to discuss with each episode. And I'm going to go on a break real quick. So first, here's a message from our sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Here's how. It's totally free. There are tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your computer and even your cell phone. But that's not all. Anchor distributes your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many, many more. You could even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Anchor is everything you need to make a complete podcast all in one small place. So go on and download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. So we're back from our break. So yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about with each of the episodes. I knew it would be really challenging to try and watch every single one of them. But I recommend watching it. It's a really, really good show. I really love the pacing of it. I love the characters in it. And I think it's a saving grace for the prequel trilogy. But yeah, so I really like this show. I highly recommend it. And lots of people like this show. You know, you could read the YouTube comments on it. How when the season 7 trailer came out, people were more excited about that than they were excited about, you know, episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Which is kind of sad, but at least Disney is getting one thing right, and that is finishing off the Clone Wars story. And kind of a side note, I'm sure some of you know about this, but before the CGI show came out in the early 2000s, there was a 2D animation version of it just called Star Wars Clone Wars. And I remember as a little kid watching that as an in-between between episodes 2 and 3. And I remember the last episode of it coming out, I want to say a month or two before episode 5 actually came out. So it's a really big deal. It's really cool. It's in the style of Samurai Jack, designed by Genndy Tartakovsky, who's a famous animator for Cartoon Network. He did Dexter's Lab, Samurai Jack. And so It's a really cool and unique style, and I think it's kind of underrated. I recommend checking that out too. It's what's considered a micro series because each episode was only like 3 or 4 minutes long, and there are tons of them. So it was kind of like a commercial break show, if I remember right. During the airing of it, it would just show up in between shows, and I really liked it. I loved the style of it, the coloring of it, and it is a really good precursor to this series, the CGI Clone Wars. And yeah, it's had a very interesting life, starting out on Cartoon Network and then Netflix and now Disney. I'm glad it's considered canon, the Star Wars The Clone Wars, because there's a lot of things that were made by Star Wars, or I guess for Star Wars, that aren't canon anymore. So I'm really glad Disney decided to make this canon, because they had a lot of really good stories in it. So I recommend checking it out. Next time will be Disney Week, and I'll be discussing about the film Dumbo. That's the next film for Disney Week. And until next time, this has been Surfing Through Cinema. I'm your host, Hawaii Harry. Take care. Thank you for listening to Surfing Through Cinema. Make sure to check us out on Facebook at Surfing Through Cinema with Hawaii Harry and on Instagram with Surfing Through Cinema. We also have a website, www.anchor.fm/Surfing Through Cinema, where you can learn more details on upcoming episodes and on past episodes. We also want to let you know we're available on YouTube, so check us out Wednesday mornings at 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.